Okay, my name is Howard Eber, and I am a grateful recovered alcoholic. I want to welcome everyone to week number two of the Big Book Comes Alive Traditions Workshop, which we have been calling the Anvils of Experience, because that's basically what Bill said the traditions were. They were hammered out on the anvils of experience. And so we're approaching so very many things in our traditions from the vantage point of history. What was going on at the time? Why did this become an issue? And so on. And just like I said last week, I want to start each meeting with a little bit more general background information. But before I do that, Andy, if you'll put up the highlighter key. I mentioned last week that we're going to be using some highlighter, specific colors to highlight throughout the study. And that's not just because I tend to be anal. It's because if you want to look for something specific in the book, say you want to look for the unity references, just thumb through the book and look for the blue highlighter. If you want to look for prayers or promises, thumb through it and look for pink. For green, you're going to find literature references and musts. Blue will be unity references. Either orange or red, both either one of those will be sacrifice references because we're going to see how so very many of the traditions have sacrifice and anonymity as their foundation. We're going to circle all of the locations as they appear in our history. And yellow, well, that's just for everything else in general. So you may want to take a screenshot of that, or we'll put it in the chat just so you have access to it during the meeting. One or two other things. This Sunday at our Big Book Comes Alive Step Study Workshop is the last Sunday, is the last meeting in the cycle. And we're going to do something different this week. We finished last week on page 164, but we stopped at the beginning of the page. We left 161 words untouched last week. That's what we're going to talk about this Sunday. I'm going to give a talk that I'm calling the last 161 words of the first 164 pages. We're going to see how incredibly Bill structured that last section of the book so that it includes every one of our steps is mentioned there. There's so many other things. There's promises. There's so many things, and we're going to try and break that down next week. And that ends the cycle. This is the flyer for that meeting. It is Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 o'clock in the UK. And this Sunday, as I said, marks the end of this cycle. The next 2 weeks of the month, meaning the last 2 weeks of January, which would be the 25th and the first week of February, the 1st. I made a mistake last week. I said the 1st was when we were going to start the new cycle. It's not. The 25th and the 1st, we're going to have a continuation, but Chris Schroeder is going to come in and give a talk on, well, a couple of things. Emotional sobriety, working with others, I think is what his focus is going to be. But for 2 weeks, Chris is going to be taking over the helm while Kathy and I take a bit of a sabbatical. And then we'll be back second Sunday in February, starting the cycle all over again. So if you need to get a study version of the big book, please pick it up, get your highlighters, and we're going to get ready to go to work. The second week in February is when the new cycle will begin. Um, okay, I hope that takes care of some business. Um, what I wanted to start today is let's go to the beginning of the book. Actually, page one, we are in Comes of Age. We're going to spend most of our time in Comes of Age. Every once in a while, there'll be a reference that'll take us maybe to Language of the Heart or the 12 and 12, in particular, those two. But for the most part, this is where we're going to spend our time, Comes of Age. And page one finds Bill talking about where this book, this writing, these words, where did they come from? Did he sit down at a typewriter and just type out a book? Or did it come from a share? And that's really where it came from. Is Bill was talking to the convention held in St. Louis in 1955. And let me read you that. I'm going to skip around here. I'm on page one of Comes of Age, When AA Came of Age by Bill W. During the first 3 days of July 1955, Alcoholics Anonymous held a convention in St. Louis commemorating the 20th anniversary of its founding. 20th anniversary. Amazing. We're coming up on a 100th anniversary. What a thing. In any case, there our fellowship declared itself come to the age of full responsibility, and there it received from its founders and old timers permanent keeping of its three great legacies of recovery, unity, and service. I will always remember those 3 days as among the greatest experiences of my life. Jump down to the bottom of the page. The General Service Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous was about to take over custody of AA's 12 traditions and the guardianship of its world services. It was to be named as the permanent successor to the founders of AA, speaking for co-founder Dr. Bob and for AA old timers everywhere. I made the delivery of the three legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous to our whole society and to its representative conference. From that time, AA went on its own to serve God's purpose for so long as it was destined under his providence to endure. Many events in the days preceding had led up to this moment. The total effect was that 5,000 people got a vision of AA such as they'd never known before. They were exposed to the main outlines of AA history. With some of us oldsters, they relived the exciting experiences that led to the creation of the 12 Steps of Recovery and the book, Alcoholics Anonymous. They heard how the AA traditions were beaten out on the anvils of group experience. Let's jump to the next paragraph. At the convention, it was widely appreciated for the first time that nobody had invented Alcoholics Anonymous. That many streams of influence and many people, some of them non-alcoholics, had helped by the grace of God to achieve AA's purpose. And on that note, I just want to kind of depart a little bit here. I mentioned last week that when I read those words, that nobody invented Alcoholics Anonymous, it made me think. And I realized that nobody, not Bill, not Bob, nobody can take credit for AA's coming into being. It just arrived. It was this, as Bill said, a chain of cosmic coincidences, and I'll add a word to that, a delicate chain of cosmic coincidences, because had one of those things not happened exactly the way it did, exactly when it did, and how it did, we probably wouldn't be here. So AA just arrived. This chain of cosmic coincidences gave birth to this thing of ours. And I'll leave that. I won't translate that anymore. But this thing of ours, and now you, everyone here, there's about 80 people here, um, are now part of that. This is one big happening, and everyone here has contributed, will contribute, and is part of that happening. And make no mistake, please, you will leave your mark. Absolutely. You absolutely will be felt. You will be remembered. You will be repeated well after you're gone. And along with all of those saints that came before us to let this light in, we now join that line. of saints that that God had appointed to be his carriers, to be his messengers, to be his vessels, to make this thing happen the way that it did. So let's get to work on the book. Enough background. We are in Comes of Age. We're going to start today where we left off on page 81. Uh, just to give you some background into what we're talking about right here. Let's start on page 79 and just get some highlighting in. The last sentence of the first paragraph says the problems of yesterday produced the blessings of today, which to me is another way of saying on the anvils of experience, the structure of our society was hammered out. He's just saying it in a different way. And ours is not a usual success story. Rather, it's the story of how, under God's grace, an unsuspected strength has arisen out of great weakness, of how, under threats of disunity and collapse, worldwide unity and brotherhood had been forged. In the course of this experience, we evolved a set of traditional principles by which we live and work together and relate ourselves as the fellowship to the world around us. These principles are called the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. They represent the distilled experience of our past, and we rely on them to carry us in unity through the challenges and dangers which the future may bring. Let's turn to the next page where we left off last week. Um, on the top of page 81, there was a story of how in Thailand there was some support expressed for the book, and a suggestion that the word good be changed, the word God be switched to good in all references in the book. And Bill didn't think that that was the right way to go, so it stayed the way it is. And on the bottom of the page, what I consider paragraph 3, because it is the third full paragraph, is where we're going to start. This paragraph begins with, what does this all mean? Now, what does this all mean? It means, incidentally, sorry, I don't mean to jump around here. The recording of last week's workshop is up on our website. So if you missed it last week, any week you miss, you'll find them there. Andy does a great job of it. He puts them up as soon as I get them to him. We also have the recordings from the Sunday night group, the main ship, the Monday night group, and now this meeting. So we have 3 meetings that we're posting, but you want to catch up on what was done last week. It's only 1 week. It's on the website. And the website is very cleverly called thebigbookstudy.com. How did they think of that? In any case, um, let's get back to what we're here for. Um, so what does this all mean? It means there are going to be AA groups in India and in Thailand, and we didn't circle them there because they've been circled earlier on the page, and in many other faraway places where alcoholics dwell. They're going to be plagued by our early fears, but we can help them and can reassure them. And I'm going to suggest you write a question at the bottom of this page in the blank section. A question. Do I consider AAs all over the world? Now, when I first wrote that question, that's some years ago, and things were different. Today, look around us. Look at these boxes. Look at where we come from. We are everywhere, everywhere. You talk about Bill being a visionary. This is the kind of stuff that just sends chills down my back. What a vision he had. and we're part of that. We're carrying that vision. So, in any case, just ask that question: do I consider AAs all over the world? Or am I just thinking of my little group in my little area, in my little state, or my little convention? You go to Zoom meetings, any Zoom meetings today, and you will find that we are international. We're all over the place. Okay, enough with that. Um, Next page, top of page 82. Speaking of fears, a story turned up at the office. It seems that AA had made a start in Tokyo. So we're going to circle Tokyo. Doesn't there's no specific color. I'm not that anal for circling. Just circle it. Um, in Tokyo. So now we're talking about another location in Tokyo. As usual, it began among the American drunks, but then it spread out to the Japanese. Let's circle Japanese because now we're not only talking about Tokyo, we're talking about all of Japan. Soon there was quite a Japanese contingent of which we heard very good reports. Then one day, a Japanese appeared at the New York office, and I apologize for some of the antiquated language that Bill uses. There's certain terms that might have been more acceptable then than they are today. I don't want to get bogged down in that, so I'm just going to read what Bill has written. But I don't think that if it was being written today, he might say an Asian appeared or something of that nature. But be that as it may, he says he had heard that his fellows in the homeland now had AA groups and had begun to write to them to get the inside track. Now, in a state of great alarm, he said, awful things are going on all over in Japan. Let's underline or circle Japan. Do you know that they have two kinds of AA over there? I bet not many of us knew this. Let's highlight the rest of the paragraph, incidentally. So he said, do you know there are two kinds of AA over there in Japan? Of course, they have the 12 steps, just as we have them. But there's now another AA leader. And above leader, let's write tradition number 2. We don't have leaders. So, to prevent that situation from ever happening, one of the things we have, one of our defenses is the second tradition. That for the group purpose, there's only one ultimate authority, and he's not Joe Flimmelgates, who decided he's going to be the head of the meeting and make some changes. And that's what's happening here. Uh, Now they have, but there's another AA leader who has written 10 steps. Let's underline written 10 steps. And it gets better. That's underlined. They are charging 100 yen to attend his meetings. And above where it says charging, let's write tradition number 7. Because we have tradition number 7 to safeguard against that, among other things. But it just shows how the traditions are filling in these gaps that appeared back then. So we got this guy who said, you know, the 12 steps, they're pretty good, but I think I could make it in 10. Now, if I went away to a spiritual retreat and I came back to the Sunday workshop and I said, you know, we've been studying 12 steps for, I don't know, maybe 15 years in that group. But I did some thinking. We're going to make it 25. I got an idea. We got 25 steps. I don't think it would be greeted too warmly. And that's what was happening over there. So they had two different AAs. Now let's look at it for a second. This new version, AA2, had a leader. We don't have that. It had 10 steps, not 12 steps. And they were not accepting contributions, they were charging admission. 100 yen, whatever that translates to. It could be a penny. The fact is, they were charging to get in, to attend the meetings. So after that sentence, after where it says charging 100 yen to attend his meetings, I've written, which do you think will last? That's simple. Doesn't take a great mind to figure out that this guy's version of AA is not going to make it. Not going to make it. And didn't. That was the end of it. But they had those kind of things going on. We just had a curiosity. How many people here knew of that story? Knew that it existed before you read the book? I didn't. I learned it from the book. It's extraordinary how many of those strange little stories we're going to come across. But that's a beauty. That's a beauty. This guy changed the steps, appointed himself leader, and started charging. Talk about grandiosity. Okay, next paragraph. Once upon a time, that sort of heresy would have scared us to death. Today, it's only amusing. Let's highlight, if you wouldn't mind, the rest of the paragraph in blue, because it is a unity reference. And let's take the first sentence first. It's a pretty good place to start. It says, we know, and let's underline, that we will soon be infiltrated by common sense and experience. Common sense and experience. I'm going to suggest you circle common sense and experience in red. In red, because they are sacrifice references. We're circling it in red and not just circling it as a location. This is an indication of sacrifice, sacrifice that people had to make. And let me kind of define terms too. He said, "We know they will soon be infiltrated by common sense and experience." Infiltrated means to penetrate something gradually. So Bill is pointing out that we know that that kind of thing will not last because it will be passed through, it would be penetrated by AAers who know what AA is supposed to be, that this perversion can't last. And it did, point in fact, it did not last. So, and again, we have to make sacrifices for every one of these things, and we made a sacrifice for common sense, we made a sacrifice for experience. Continuing, they'll find that nobody can professionalize AA's 12th step, and the elder who means well and does badly, let's underline that, who means well and does badly, will mend his ways. He'll finally see that alcoholism is a quest for survival in which, let's double underline the rest of this paragraph, just 2 lines, is a quest for survival in which the good is sometimes the enemy of the best, and that only the best can bring the true good. And good is the enemy of the best, and only the best can bring true good. I think in a way what Bill is saying here is that, and my dad taught me this too, is to always set your objectives just slightly beyond your grasp. Just so we always have to be stretching a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Because if we ever had it in our grasp, we'd be done and we'll never be done. So, sometimes good, a good idea for one person can be the enemy of the best, and only the best can bring the true good for us. And if you'd like to, you may want to even tweak that by circling it in red, because that is an example of sacrifice as well. It hadn't occurred to me until this moment, but it is definitely a sacrifice. You have to make sacrifices. You think it's the best thing in the world, but for the greatest good, not so. Okay, continuing. Very much more could be told about AA out on its distant reaches, its pioneering fronts. For example, I love when he starts sentences like that because I know we're going to have some fun. I know we're going somewhere. For example, there's an AA night and day radio communication that passes from tankers on the Atlantic over to the Pacific. There's good old Captain Jack on a Standard Oil tanker plying the world's posts. He leaves AA literature when he goes ashore, and he looks up bartenders, doctors, and preachers, asking them for prospects. So rather than going to look for drinking buddies, he's looking for prospects for Alcoholics Anonymous. Whatever port he goes into, let's see if we can get a meeting started there. Continuing, an AA group just recently started in, and let's circle, Florence, Italy. Now we're in Italy. Started in Florence, Italy, because an AA sailor came ashore and got a prospect from a bartender. How's that? Bartender in a sense, turns in one of his best customers, right? This guy, I can retire on him, but the guy needs help. So he turns him over to the guy from AA. That's great. Okay. Uh, and got a prospect from a bartender. Many a group starts in such an improbable and fantastic way. It has become almost literally true that where two or three of us are gathered in his name, there a group will form. I think we should highlight that sentence in pink. That is a promise. Um, I've certainly seen that in other places. Uh, so let's highlight that one. And someone's trying to get my attention, so let me just take care of this. Okay. Okay. Um, it has become almost literally true that where two or three of us are gathered together in his name, there a group will form. Isn't that from the Bible, right? Where others had gathered, where to gather in my name is where you find God. Okay. Let me stay out of things I don't know much about, like the Bible. Okay. Um, Incidentally, I forgot to mention this. We highlighted that last pair on the last paragraph where it says good is sometimes the enemy of the best, and only the best can bring true good. Next to that, in what I call the outside border, which is the left side, all of that space, you may want to turn the book on the side to write this question. Do I consider what is best for AA in my 12-step work? Do I consider what's best for AA in my 12-step work? Just a challenge. Okay, getting back to the book, um, bottom of the page, 4 lines up from the bottom, it says, let me tell you the wonderful legend about the AA group way up toward Point Barrow in Alaska. Let's circle Alaska. You may want to circle Point Barrow too. It's a specific location. But I love this story. This is another story like the one we just read that I had no idea about. Here's the story. A couple of prospectors went out and got themselves a cabin and a case of scotch. prospectors. They went out looking for gold. They went out looking to make a fortune. So they go up there where they heard there was these these veins of gold and so on. So they went up to Alaska and they brought a case of scotch because what are you going to do up there? The weather turned bitter, 50 below, and they got so drunk they let the fire go out. Sound familiar? Barely escaping death by freezing, one of them woke up in time to rekindle the fire. He was prowling around outside for fuel. He's looking for shit to burn. He's looking for something he could use to keep that fire going. Things that aren't soaked and wet, that are kind of dry or he can dry out. He was prowling around outside for fuel, and he looked into an empty oil drum filled with frozen water. Down in the ice cake, he saw a reddish yellow object. That's the reddish yellow object that he saw in the bottom of the oil can. Frozen, frozen. It's a hell of a story. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's a hell of a story. So he said, down in he was prowling around and he looked at an empty oil drum with frozen water. Down in the ice cake, he saw a reddish yellow object. They thought it out, and it turned out to be an AA book. Let's underline that. I'm sorry, let's highlight that in green because that is a reference to literature. They found gold. They found our book. And let's highlight the next sentence, also in green for literature. One of the pair read the book and sobered up. Read the book and sobered up. I've got written next to where it says they thought it out and it turned out to be an AA book. In that inside margin, which is to the left of that paragraph I've just written, is it odd or is it God? Right? You're up in Alaska and you find at the bottom of an empty can a frozen big book. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. That's God showing up anonymously, and it's not a coincidence. That's the name that God uses when he wants to. It's coincidence, I think. Okay, in any case, let's continue. So this guy read the book and he sobered up. The legend has it that he became the founder of one of our fastest north groups, perhaps the one in which we now have our farthest north group. I'm sorry, perhaps the one in which we now have plenty of Eskimos. I think today we would write indigenous people. Uh, just a thought. And remember, the context in which the book was written was a different time, but I don't think he meant anything negative about it. That was just the term that they used. Okay, so perhaps the one in which we now have plenty of indigenous people. The last I heard about those Alaskan groups was that they were in communication by radio every day with the AA group that functions on the north end of the Greenland ice cap. And so we're going to circle Greenland because there's another location. Who knows? Might even become a state in the United States. But we are definitely not getting into those things. North end of the Iceland green cap, Iceland ice cap, Greenland ice cap. Sorry about that. Among the men at our air base there. Alcoholics Anonymous got started in Ireland. And let's circle Ireland. Here's a story that every time I tell it, someone says they knew about this stuff. So this is maybe a little bit more commonly known. So AA got started in Ireland in 1946. Let's underline 1946, when Connor F., an AA tavern owner from Philadelphia, Philadelphia no less, decided to go on a vacation with his wife to the Emerald Isle. Just probably should note Philadelphia is a city, one of the biggest cities in the United States. Um, it's in Pennsylvania, the state of Pennsylvania. There's this town, there's a city of Philadelphia. So he's talking about a place in the United States. In case geography wasn't your thing, now we know where it is. Okay. Um, they decided to go on a vacation with his wife to the Emerald Isle, to Ireland. When they got to Dublin, please circle Dublin. It's a reference to location, not just Ireland. Now we're narrowing it down, and we're going to get even further in a moment. When they got to Dublin, they both said, let's highlight this. Never mind the vacation. Let's start the group here. So they made their way to a local mental hospital. Um, I've put an asterisk next to the local hospital, and in the bottom of the page, I've identified that hospital. And if you want to identify it, I'll tell you the name of it. At the bottom of the page, I have my asterisk, and here's the footnote. The hospital's name is St. Patrick's Mental Hospital in Dublin. St. Patrick's Mental Hospital in Dublin. So, um, so they made their way to a local mental hospital, we mentioned, St. Patrick's, the one endowed by the author clergyman Swift, and there they found their first man, Richard P. And I've got that underlined. This should mean something to people who founded this thing. And so AA began to take root in Ireland. The Dublin group, by the way, has achieved a special renown because of its world correspondent, Sackville M., the group's honorable secretary. And let's highlight this next sentence in green. When it comes to helping alcoholics by mail, he is in no doubt the world's champion. And I've highlighted it in green because even though it doesn't mention it, what he's sending out, what he's communicating with by mail is our literature. He's sending books. I don't think he's sending thank you cards for just telling us where you are and who you are. It's not about thank you. He is sending them literature, and that's how AA grows, through literature. Um, Continuing, um, the beginning of AA in England. Now let's circle that. Here's another location. In early 1947, let's underline 1947, I'll come back to it in a moment, was a striking one. Let's hone in a little bit. It's not just 1947. The date was March 30th, 1947. For those of you who are as anal as I am, I'm thinking of you, Bert. Uh, in early 1947, that's March 30th, 1947, was a striking one. Some years ago, Bob B. a Canadian mining engineer, went to London where he met with Bill H., an alcoholic grocer. By correspondence with New York, let's highlight that phrase in green. It is a reference once again to literature. That's the correspondence, is literature. What is this thing about? How do I do it here? Um, by correspondence with New York, two or three of the English were already struggling for sobriety. But the appearance of these two upon the scene soon resulted in an active AA group. You may want to underline active a couple of times because it's one thing to call yourself an AA group, it's another to be considered an active AA group. And I think the difference is one, probably a group discussion meeting where people come and dump the problems of the day, and an active meeting is where people get together and do what the big book tells us to do, to think of ways and means to attract more people to our fellowship. What do we do to get people in that door? Um, so continuing, um, by correspondence with New York, two or three of the English were already struggling for sobriety, but the appearance of these two upon the scene soon resulted in an active AA group. Okay, this is where we left off. As a result, London, and indeed all England, is today sprawling with groups. At first, however, they met some resistance in Britain at the only time at one time only the Financial Chronicle would publish an advertisement about AA. All the other English papers were afraid it was a fraud. They thought we were a fraud. Which, incidentally, you're familiar with our history. You know that Jack Alexander wrote his article with the intention of exposing AA as a big fraud. And turns out he became one of our most ardent, loyal supporters. Okay, in any case, I want to further be specific here at the beginning of this paragraph, and I apologize if I'm confusing anyone. We mentioned that this event took place March 30th, 1947, but I've been given some additional information, and I'm going to pass it along to you. It was not just March 30th, 1947. It was in the Dorchester Hotel, Dorchester, in London, in room 202. And at the time, that room, that suite, was called the Owsler, Ousler suite, the Owsler suite. And we talked about Owsler in the early part of our big book study. Um, Come join us in a few weeks and you'll learn about them too. Okay, but let's continue where we were. The reverse, we're at the bottom of the page now. The reverse process was seen when a Scottish nobleman, so let's circle Scottish. Now we've got another place. Philip journeyed to America. He came over to have a look at the international Christian leadership movement, where he met with a group of businessmen who were interested in bringing God into industry through the medium of breakfast clubs for prayer and planning. Next to that, in that outside margin on the left, I've just written Oxford groups because it pretty well describes the Oxford groups. They would have these breakfasts, they would have these prayer meetings, and this is what they did at those giant breakfasts. So, continuing, um, Philip thought maybe he could introduce the breakfast club idea to Scotland, and he hoped that such good work would loosen his fatal attachment to the bottle. So he was still drinking when he got this idea. At the very first session, he met an old time Philadelphia AA, George R. I've got that highlighted in yellow, just general highlight, who gave him AA right off the spiritual main line. The head of one of Scotland's most ancient clans sobered up on the spot. He took AA back to its native heath, and soon alcoholic Scots were drying up all the way from Glasgow ship chandlers to society folks in Edinburgh. Edinburgh. Canadian AA, and let's circle Canadian, is AA Canadian AA 2 is the very best. Sometime in 1940, a temperance worker at AA at Toronto showed the AA book to an alcoholic. Let's highlight in green, showed the AA book to an alcoholic. That's in green because it's very obviously spreading the message through literature. Continuing, um, again, um, he showed the AA book to an alcoholic who resisted all other attempts at rescue. Again, the AA book turned the trick. I'm highlighting that in green as well, incidentally. The AA book turned the trick. And together, these two exposed many a Toronto problem drinker to the AA contagion. Let's underline AA contagion. And the process of multiplication set in, which eventually carried AA to about every city and town in the province of Ontario. May want to circle Ontario. This good friend, George Little, a minister as well as a temperance worker, was not a little disappointed, was not a little disappointed that his strange new flock showed no interest whatever in getting everybody bone dry. They insisted they were concerned only with local imbibers who wanted AA. Here it was definitely proved for the first time that AA could never become a dry crusade. And let's highlight that and underline AA could never become a dry crusade. Um, AA could never become a dry crusade, a fact which has since puzzled many a worker in the dry cause. This first crossing of the border was followed in 1941 now to another when Winslow, Ontario, just across the river from Detroit, began to harbor Canada's group, Canada's group number two. In Vancouver, British Columbia. Now let's highlight I'm sorry, circle Vancouver, British Columbia. Where are we in time? Okay, we're okay. Uh, a non-alcoholic. So we've got a location. We've got Vancouver, British Columbia. We've been told a non-alcoholic who also paired with an alcoholic from the very start. This time it was a public spirited candy manufacturer who passed the book on to Charlie B., a real estate broker inspired with the message and full of recovery. This pair canvassed the city of Victoria and half of Providence in a hurry, and soon BC's Alcoholics Anonymous was a reality. After a time, the message spread eastward over the prairies of Alberta, let's circle that, Saskatchewan, let's circle that, and Manitoba, let's circle that, please. Um, let's just go back through that paragraph, a couple of things I might have missed. On the one, two, three, fourth line, it says that the candy manufacturer who passed the book on, and passed the book on is in green. It's a reference to doing just that. But, oh, and on the next line where it says, inspired with the message and full of energy. What's another word for energy? Enthusiasm, especially when we're talking about the big book. Enthusiasm. We've broken that down countless number of times in the workshop. It means in sync with God, to be at one with God. In a way, kind of means this, almost what namaste means. May the God in you, may the God in me connect with the God in you. Okay, continuing. Um, Top of page 85, Montreal, and let's circle that because now we have another location, had begun to simmer. Dave B., the Montreal group's leader and a marathon 12-stepper, let's highlight the rest of this sentence, had sobered up on reading an AA book sent to him by his sister. That sentence is highlighted in green because it is obviously a literature reference. But I've also got underlined and even to some extent circled, not in red, just circled, where it says, sobered up on reading an AA book. He didn't need somebody with him to read it. All he had, all he be, is a man with this book in his hand. And that's what this guy did. He got other people sober through his spiritual experience that he had through the book. Um, Again, the AA book, let's underline that in green. It's a literature reference. Again, the AA book turned the trick. And together, these two exposed many a Toronto problem drinker to the AA contagion. I read that already, didn't I? Yes, I did. I'm sorry. Uh, but while we're there, contagion, AA contagion. Contagion is a term that's used to indicate the spreading of something, usually the spreading of a disease, of an emotion, of an ideology, of an idea. Contagion just means a spreading of this idea. And that's what he's talking about here, is that the book created this contagion. Um, where were we? Montreal. Uh, yeah, we're on the top of 85, right, Andy? Okay. Montreal, and we're circling Montreal, meanwhile, had begun to simmer. Dave B., the Montreal group's founder and a marathon 12-stepper, sobered up on reading an AA book sent by his sister. That's where we left off, I believe. Here we saw AA's very first French members. I shall forever remember that early bilingual provincial meeting where I first heard the Lord's Prayer in French. In due course, solid AA began to flourish in Newfoundland, and let's circle that. Newfoundland. I guess it's spelled Newfoundland, but I believe it's pronounced otherwise. Began to flourish there, and the Maritime Province. Let's circle Maritime Province. And of course, it was only a question of time when Quebec City, we'll circle that, and Trois-Rivières. My French just sucks. Trois-Rivières. I think it means three rivers anyway. Thus flanked on both sides would have their own groups. The Quebec clergy, at first doubtful, are today among AA's most ardent well-wishers. So are many public officials. We can never forget the party that Montreal's mayor, Howdy, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, it's probably wrong, Howdy or Hootie, once threw for us. It was probably the first official reception that any AA group ever had. As we know, and let's highlight the rest of this sentence in green, AA literature has a way of turning up in most surprising places. A broker of Johannesburg, South Africa, read an article in the Reader's Digest, told us about, read an article in Reader's Digest about us, and sent to New York for a pamphlet, which so excited him that he felt like a buzzsaw on the derelict drunks of his city. He had been, he had a calling to scrape the bottom of the barrel as an extra inducement. And let's highlight, he offered his clients a certain amount of rehabilitation money. How well you think that one went over? Paying them to come in. That's one way to build your attendance at a meeting. I'm hoping that they didn't pay the people till the end of the meeting because that's the only way they'll stay till the end of the meeting. But in any case, they offered him this rehabilitation money. Naturally, he was flooded by swarms of eager aspirants who, it soon appeared, let's highlight this, were far more interested in handouts than they were in sobriety. Duh. You may want to write that. That's what I've got written next to it in my book. It's just duh. You think verging on complete wreck, this enterprise was saved by the timely arrival of another drinker, Val D, who had just obtained a copy of the AA book, one reading of which had struck him cold sober. Almost at the same time, another South African, and let's circle that, a native of Perth, let's circle Perth, had sobered up through the book and had gone right to work on the alcoholics in his own town. Let's go back a little bit through that paragraph. It said, on timely arrival of another drinker, Val D, who had just obtained a copy of the AA book. Let's highlight that just obtained a copy in green, please. That is a literature reference, and that's how he got the message. Um, let's see. Let me just go a little bit further. Um, though the more orthodox methods of these two devotees of AA's big book, and with reinforcing letters from general headquarters, things began to hum in South Africa. A whole volume could now be written about our progress down there, telling how AA has grown from these very fragile beginnings. In the latter part of 1942, he began to get, we began to get our first letters from Australia. Hey, Kevin, finally get to Australia. Good day. So let's circle Australia. Where they call that a knife? Okay. Our first letters from Australia from S.J. Minogue, and I think I'm pronouncing that right, Minogue, a psychiatrist associated with Rydalmere Mental Hospital. I know I'm butchering that. Rydalmere Mental Hospital. Is that right? Kevin, you're saying I'm right? Yeah. Oh, okay. Not bad. Okay. and from a priest, Father Dunlea, at the same institution. We furnished them with literature, including the AA book. Let's highlight that sentence in green. That's a literature reference if there ever was one. And a correspondence started with Dr. Minogue, which lasted ever since. Month after month, the doctor and the priest labored with their grim cases and were aided by an attendant named Mr. Arch McCune, McKinnon, McKinnon, I think it would be, right? McKinnon? Okay. Well, I'm really butchering names tonight. This is not my night for names. Um, so this guy, Mr. Arch, let's call him. It's a lot easier than the other one. Mr. March, letter after letter from Dr. Minogue reported no results at all. Indeed, it took over 2 years to produce anything like an AA group. These non-alcoholics had great difficulty in getting the proper identification with their patients. But late in 1944, they finally had success with two of them, Max, Ben and Rex, the latter becoming Australia's first AA secretary. So Rex, I'm just wrecking everybody's name here today. Rex became Australia's first AA secretary. And I'm going to go a little further here because some of you know about this next paragraph. In March 1945, Rex wrote Bobby. The Bobby we're talking about, Bobby Berger. Um, do I have the book here handy? Well, our friend Gary had written a book on Bobby Berger. It's a great book. She practically kept AA afloat for a while, but Rex wrote Bobby at the New York office in substance as follows: Dear Secretary, Dr. Minogue has handed over all of the correspondence to me, he being too fully occupied as superintendent at Rydalmere to answer it himself. It must not be thought, however, that the doctor's interest is flagging. For the contrary is the case. You'll be pleased to know, and let's underline that a group has now been formed in Sydney. That's Circle Sydney. Our address is above. The movement here was started by Dr. Minogue, Father Dunley, and Mr. McKinnon, a hospital attendant. They are not alcoholics. Let's underline that. But they've gathered around themselves 7 or 8 real ones, including myself. And we are netting new recruits every day. Netting. Like if you're a fishing boat goes out, throws the net out, and then scoops it back in and brings in all of the fish with it. I assume that's what we're talking about. Um, well, let's finish here. Mm, mm, mm. We are netting new recruits every day. We feel that the movement is gathering momentum in Australia, so we now want a formal affiliation with Alcoholics Anonymous. Sincerely yours, Rex A., Secretary. The Aussies were indeed on their way. Australia, and we've already circled it, but we may want to circle it again. Australia now has its thousands of members in all walks of life, and on all sides they enjoy the warmest public blessing. The Australia development will certainly be remembered as a seldom matched example of, let's highlight and underline, pioneering fortitude and faith. Pioneering fortitude tells me strength, resolve, that it managed to survive because of strength and faith. And just for the heck of it, you may want to underline pioneering fortitude and faith in red, because I think that may be considered a sacrifice reference. And I think that's where we're going to stop today. Yep. We're going to stop right there on page 86, the last paragraph. Let me kill the recording.